Hello everyone and welcome to this new live no-coding session in which we are going to recreate this Shopify landing page. So as you can see, the landing page is very simple, very minimalist, and we're going to recreate it from scratch with the Sketch.io platform. So let's get started. We of course start with this blank canvas, and we're going to start by setting the green background here in the body element. So we select the body element, and in the image I'm simply gonna copy the link, the address to that background. We need to not repeat the background like this, and we can do contain for the size, position it like this so that it doesn't scroll, and we're pretty much done with this first part. Now we can get the logo. So we can first add a kind of a header in the body element that will contain all of this part here. So let's add a div block like this. So this is the element, and then we add the image, an image for the logo. So like this. Now I'm gonna upload the image. It's gonna be this one. Alright, select asset. Now we can scale it down, of course. So maybe something like 200 pixels. Maybe it's too much. So 120. Yeah, it sounds right. Now we're gonna change this div block to display as a flex element. Well, I'm gonna reset the style and I'm gonna add a class. I'm gonna call it header. Alright, so that we can apply the styling directly to the header class instead. And we're gonna style it like this. Alright, so now everything is centered. Maybe we can add a little bit of margin. Gonna reset the margin and apply now the margin on the header element. So maybe 20 pixels. Alright. Now we're gonna add the text here. So sell online with Shopify. So I'm gonna add a h1 element, and we're gonna change the text like this. I'm gonna move it inside of the header like this. And in the header, I'm gonna set the color to white, like this. And I'm gonna change the default font for the whole body element so that it applies to all the elements inside. And the one that I'm gonna choose is called DM. I'm gonna just try to find it here. Yeah, this one, DM100. All right. It's the one that looks the closest to this one. And now we can add a class to this first selling point. So maybe main title. All right, let's increase the size. Maybe something like 3em. All right, maybe we can add some margin. 30 pixels. Yeah, and then we can add this second line here. So we add an h2 like this. Copy the text. We can maybe decrease the weight, something like this. Maybe we can increase the spacing between the letters. So maybe something like 0.1 em. Maybe a little bit less. All right, we can increase the size. I think it's still too much. So maybe here we can do a little bit more. Maybe you can just remove this. All right. I feel like the text here is a little bit bigger, so maybe we can do 3.4 and increase this one as well, 1.8. All right, and now we can add some bottom margin here, so maybe 30 pixels as well. All right, and now we can add this form here. So we can add a MailChimp form. So in the form section we have MailChimp, so let's add it here. Let's update here the default values for the form element. Let's remove here the background. Let's max width, we can remove this. All right, remove this as well. Yeah, and now what we can do is we can apply the flexbox on this element like this, so that it displays this way. We can align the element center. No need to wrap, so let's remove this like this. And now what we can do is that we can disable these labels, so we can just disable them like this. All right, now we can go to the properties of the MailChimp element, and we're gonna show only the email field, so no first and last names, so none, so just the email field like this. And now we can start adding some styling to this input element. So let's click on this button. So it's some kind of a gray. So I'm gonna make sure it's the same font, yeah. And reset this, apply this color, that's good. We don't need to capitalize. All right, and we can change here the color to like a gray like this in the hover state, because when you hover the element it turns to green. We need it to be a little bit darker. Yeah, something like this. And when you click on it, you see that there's a shadow, kind of a shadow that becomes stronger. So we go to the normal state, and we can apply a shadow here. Well, we'll get back to the shadow later because we need to adjust some styling here. So let's click on this element, the text field, and let's add a lot of margin. So here it looks like maybe 20 pixels everywhere. Maybe that's too much, so maybe 15. All right. Maybe we can increase the text. So 1.1. All right. So enter your email address. Like this. And now we can add some margin. So this is the inner margin. Let's add maybe 15 pixels to the right. And we can basically, maybe we can set the radius to something like 5 pixels. And what we can do also is to, well, we can remove the border. And we can set the base size to maybe something like 600 pixels. Oh yeah, so the base size is in the other axis, so let's just reset these values, and instead we're gonna set the width directly like this. So maybe 600 pixels, or maybe less. All right, now we can change here the align items from center to stretch. All right, we can click on this element, and this one is aligned as center. We reset this, and now you see that it stretches. And now we can change here the text, and we can add another margin on the other axis. So maybe something like 20 pixels. And here we can type in start free trial. We can save, we can see so far what we have. Yeah, so this one is because we did not select the MailChimp audience yet, so I'm gonna solve that in a second. So for that, we just need to select the MailChimp form here, and we select the audience. Yeah, refresh the page. I'm gonna select the MailChimp form, so this one, and select the sketch.io audience, and now it should work. All right, so we see that there are a few issues here. So the first one is that these two elements don't have the same height, and the reason is that this one probably has some kind of a outer margin that gives this little space here. So let's just select this element, and we can see here. All right, so it doesn't have a margin, an outer margin. So there's probably something else that is causing this issue. So maybe it's the form field. Yeah, so we can reset these. Perfect. And now they have the same height. Let's refresh. Perfect. So now they have the same height, and this is basically what we want. All right. So we just gonna switch between the two. All right. So this text is a little bit too big. We need more margin here. Sorry. And we need to adjust the spacing here. So let's do that. So this text here is a little bit too big. So let's do 1 EM. And here we can add more margin. So maybe 25. All right. There's also now the issue of the shadow. So I'm gonna make it a little bit less strong. Yeah. So an alpha of 40% seems right. And now when you click on it, it changes color. So we need to change the state of the button when it's pressed. So let's reset the color here. So we don't want to change the color, but we want to increase the shadow. So we're gonna remove a little bit of blur like this, so 5 pixels instead of 10, and maybe increase the color, the alpha value, so the transparency to 70% or the opacity to 70%. Now let's refresh the page. All right, and now when you click, it looks like this. All right, so now we can adjust some spacing. So let's see, this is the target, this is what we have. So let's adjust a little bit of spacing. So this one has too much spacing at the bottom. So here maybe 20 pixels should be enough. And this one should have some spacing at the bottom. So maybe 15 pixels. All right, let's refresh and let's switch. All right. Yeah, maybe the logo is a little bit too small compared to the target that we want. So let's change that. So let's change here the dimension to 150. All right. And we can center the image like this. Just remove these. All right. Now we need to add this text. That's very easy, as you see. Let's add maybe a div text. All right. Copy the text. We can set a maximum width of maybe 600 pixels, maybe a little bit more, 700. We need to maybe remove this margin, add an upper margin of 20 pixels, and of course reduce the size to something like this. Alright, so maybe, yeah, so it needs to fit in this area, so maybe 700 is too much. So let's do 650 or just 600. Alright, even less. Alright, so maybe 550 pixels. Alright, and yeah, we also need to reduce the weight of this text. So maybe something like this. So we need to center it. Alright. Perfect. Let's look at our results so far. So this is what it looked like. This is our target. I see that maybe we need to add some more radius here, and this text field is a little bit too big. So let's go down here. Here let's put a width of 350, and let's add more radius here. This one should be probably 4 pixels everywhere. Alright. Alright, maybe this text should be a little bit bigger. So maybe 1.1. Alright. Alright. Now, the next thing we need to do is to add the little icon that we have here. So let's copy the image and let's add the image right here. So we're going to add it outside of the header. So this is the default image. Let's change the URL. And now the body element, we're going to change it to be flex as well. And direction like this. And align elements to the center. Alright. Now let's take this header and we're gonna we're gonna go to the body and we're gonna stretch the elements. But for the specific image, we're gonna self-align it as center, like this. Now we go to the header and we can add some margin here below. So maybe something like 30 pixels. Alright, let's save and let's look at the result so far. So this is what we have. Very similar. Alright, so now we can add these selling points we have here. So we have an icon, a title, and a description. So let's start and do that. So we're gonna add a div block below, and we're gonna apply a class. We're gonna remove first these margins and apply a new class. We're gonna call it selling point, and we can add you can change the display mode to a grid mode, and we have basically we have 3 columns, and we can add maybe a gap of 15 pixels between the columns. Alright, and now we can add our selling point to this element. So this one is gonna be selling point like this. Alright, we are going to add a small image, so that's for the icon. Alright, let's upload an image here. So this is for the first icon. Select asset. Alright, and now we can add the little title. So let's add here for the title. We can add a class. So selling point icon, title I mean, create class, and now we have another one, and this one is going to be for the actual description for the selling point. So selling point description. Alright, let's move it inside here, just below like this. Alright, and now we can, so let's think a little bit. So this image is a little bit too big, so let's add a class, selling point icon. Let's reduce the size a little bit. So we're gonna give it a width of maybe 80 pixels. Maybe that's still too much. So 50. Alright. This one is gonna be the first selling point. We're gonna remove the default margins as usual, like this. Remove margin. This one is gonna be bold, like this. So let's add, let's change the weight, something like this. And let's copy now the texts. Alright, and the same for the description, like this. Alright, so now we can maybe adjust here this div block. So what we might want to do is first add some margin here, and we want to limit the dimension of the width of the block to maybe 800 pixels. So let's do something like maximum width of 800 pixels, and let's self-align it to the center like this. Now let's add some margin here. Or first, let's add an outer margin to the top, like this, and one here, maybe 10 pixels, and another 10 pixels. Alright. Maybe 800 was not enough, so let's add a little bit like this. And this one we can also notice that it's a little bit gray, so let's change that. Alright. Now we can duplicate this element 3 times and change the element, the icon, the titles, and so on. We can also make it into a component, and I think we're gonna do that. It's a lot cleaner. So selling point, like this. So now it's a component, and the reason why we might want to do that is that when you convert it into a component, if you change something in one place, it's going to change in all the other places. So but we need to link now the image as a component property. So let's call it icon. Here, title, and this one to the description. Alright, and now we exit the component, and we can select each one of these and change the title, the description, and so on for each and every element. So let's change here the icon. So this is the second icon we have. Then we can change here the text, the title. And the description. Alright, and let's do the same thing here with the third one. So we select, we change the icon, select it, change the title, the description, and we're done. Alright, so now what we can do is maybe add some margin to the bottom. So maybe 30 pixels like this, All right, let's save. Let's see what we have so far. Perfect. So it looks very similar to this one. Maybe we need to add more margin here to the top. So maybe 90 pixels. All right, and refresh. And this is the comparison. I mean, from this to this. Of course, there's a difference here between the margins. So let's increase this one here. So let's refresh. All right. So it's very similar. We don't need to be super specific. Now we add a margin here, and we can add this block with these images. So we add a new block, and we can call it, can add a class, and we can call it used by. And the same as this block, we can set the maximum width to, I think it was 900 pixels, right? And we can self-align it to the center. That's right here. All right, and now we can add the images or the logos inside. All right, now we can change for this first logo. Let's copy the link. All right, we need to move it inside here like this. Now the used by, we're gonna add a, well, let's remove the default margin. Let's select it again. Let's add now maybe a margin of 15 pixels like this. And an outer margin of, I think, something like 90 pixels at least. And yeah, the width, we're going to set it to 100% so that it stretches by default. We're going to center everything inside, and we're going to add two borders, one at the top. It's going to be very slight, 25%, and one at the bottom like this, 25% as well. All right, let's save. And now let's duplicate this and copy all the other logos. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more logos. Copy the image, and let's duplicate this image like this. All right, and now let's change the images. Yeah, I think I've overridden one, so let's move this one. Let's set this one, and let's copy this one again. So it was this one, I guess. All right, now we have an issue of wrapping. So let's select this block. Let's go to the flex. So now we disabled the wrapping, and we can align the elements to the center. Yeah, disable wrapping like this. And maybe we can add a little bit more margin here and there. And actually, I would maybe even consider resizing these images, but for now, let's just start with the margin. So this to 30 pixels, and this too. And an outer margin maybe of 90 pixels as well, like this. So these images need to be much smaller. So let's select them. we can maybe add class used logo, and let's add it to every single one of these images. All right. And now let's apply a styling that will apply to all of them. So maybe for the width we can put, so we have 8 logos, so we can divide this area by 8. So that's about 12.5%, so maybe 10%, a little bit less. All right. And now we can select this element and justify space between, like this. All right. Let's look at the result so far. This is what we have, and this is what we want. It's very similar. We need to increase here the margin. All right, and maybe this is not 900 pixels. Maybe it's something like 550. So let's change both of these to be 950. This one as well, 950. And let's add even more margin. All right. Let's double check. Yeah. All right. So now the last part is this code, and of course these links. So let's do that. Very simple, as you probably think. So you just add a text element, copy here the code, then we can maybe set a dimension here. So maybe this one is 600 pixels. And we can self-align it to the center, and we can increase the size to maybe 2.3. All right, so maybe that's too much. 1.8, center, maybe that is still too much. All right. All right. Maybe something that I can notice is that there is quite some spacing between the lines, and as well as here now for the setting point. So maybe this is a setting that we need to set on the body element. So line spacing, instead of 1.2, maybe you can do 1.5, like this. Let's see. Yeah, that's way too much. So 1.5 seems to be right. All right. Yeah. And this one, however, does seem like a 2. Maybe 1.8. All right. And now we need to add the author of the citation, or the quote. So here it's in uppercase, but we can always set it here, and we can center, set here the weight. All right, and maybe we can decrease the just let's put a gray like this. I think it's also a little bit smaller, so maybe 0.9. All right. And now we can add the start free trial button. So that's a form button, or just a link button if you want. Link button. So let's do link button. Let's move it to the bottom like this, and it says start free trial. All right, we need to self-align it as usual to the center, like this. And now let's work a little bit on so here, since I've changed the self-align of this one, it applied everywhere. So let's back up a little bit. All right, and let's apply a class so that it only applies to this button. So start trial. And now we can apply the self-align to the center without breaking what we've done already. All right, so now let's add a lot of styling to this element. So maybe 20 pixels here, 20 pixels there. Here we can add a margin of maybe 100 pixels, like this. All right, we need to change here the color, and here the margin is a little bit too much. Let's change the color to the green that Shopify uses. So this is the exact color. All right. Oh, actually this is the border, so we need to remove this. What we wanted is the background, not the border. All right. All right, now we need to do the hover, so it's a little bit darker. And when it's pressed, it's even more. All right, let's save. And here, now we add more margin to the bottom. So maybe this was too much. So maybe this should be 80. And this one 80 as well. All right. And now we can save. See so far what we've done. All right. And it's very similar. Now we need to add the little links. So let's add a block. Let's call it footer. All right. And here we have these links that are not perfectly aligned to the right. So we should align the block, the text of the block to the right. We can add links. So link text. And this will be terms of service. Yeah, just terms of service. All right. Where is it? Right, so it's this link. We need to add it inside of the footer, and we see that it's aligned to the right. Let's duplicate this, and this one is privacy policy. All right, let's add some margin between the links. Something like this, maybe a little bit more, or maybe the other side. All right, and now we need to set this block to have the same dimension as usual. So I think it was 950 pixels. And self-align it to the center, but here the width to 100 pixels, just like that. Now we change here the color of the links to be the same. I think it was the same as this, I think. So let's copy the color from here and let's apply it to the links instead. All right, and before we end, there's a little bit of space here below, so let's add a little bit of margin, maybe 15 pixels, like this. All right, so let's refresh the page. This is the final version. So we see that this is what we have made, and this is our target. So you can barely distinguish between the both examples, and you can see that in around 30 minutes, 40 minutes, we were able to copy this exact landing page and make it our own. Of course, this is for practice, for getting inspiration. You can practice using Sketch. You can try copying what already exists and then improve your skills and hopefully make things out of your own mind in the future. So thank you for listening, and I hope this tutorial was helpful